Okay, so now it's time to bring it all back home. Let's do a small outline of the entire synopsis of the trials of Odysseus in the Odyssey, and give a small outline, whilst at the same time finish this up with a little bit of a comparison and talk on the whole Nolan situation and the Nolanites and all the excuses that we can, come up with behind all that. Let's go. This is the outline. Trial 1. The sack of the Kikons. This is a trial of comfort. Basically here, it just shows that our body, our life, our habits are things that have put us in a state of comfort where we continue doing the same things over and over again. And it's a little bit hard for us to snap out of it. So that's what that first trial is showing us. They go from a war back straight away into sacking cities and, pretty much experiencing the same thing again and doing more acts of war. A baser life, their old life, and basically living still in the old ways instead of actually evolving and actually changing. So that's the first trial. The second trial after that is the Lotophagi, the lotus eaters. And at this point here, I would argue this is the first kind of like pushback of our habits, trying to push back to our new direction and our new decision. So we make the decision on the previous trial, at the end of the previous trial, once we realize what we're doing is harming us, and we decide, what, I want to go home, I don't want to do this anymore. Now there's parts of us that are so used to living in that life, and we have grown certain aspects of our character inside us to want to live in that way, and all those inside us that reside start to fight back and push back, and we practically have to drag them onto the ship and tie them down in order for us to continue down our journey. So first, it's old habits. We're living in a situation until we, life slaps us in the face and we wake up and we're like, what, I gotta change. We make the choice to change. After we make the choice to change, now we have the next part where all our habits are starting to come back and starting to fight back to us and be like, why do you want to change? And they're tempting us to fall back into the old pattern. After that, we have the Cyclops, Polyphemos, symbolism of narrow-minded, brute flesh, let's just say. I would argue something that I didn't add into it, but as I'm simplifying and going through this entire process and connecting it all together, I could also say that this is some of the temptations of the flesh. Great sex, great food, just enjoying all those satisfactions, let's just say. It also shows the narrow-minded, plain brute force, and how the flesh, and I gave some examples also with how sometimes when our psyche doesn't have events or things to occupy our mind with or to try to create obstacles, it uses the own body to fight against us. And I used the meditation example in one of those videos to actually describe that with one of my personal experiences. The body will try, at that point, narrow-mindedly, to stop our evolution and become an obstacle. Wit and cunning, so there's multiple lessons here, despite the obvious of, that you can win brute force with wit and cunning and strategy. At the same time, this is actually showing us that the Cyclops did start eating a lot of the men in the crew. Small parenthesis, which I probably should have said beginning this, but I've said this so many times in the previous videos. I'm going to throw this in as well. Odysseus sets back home after the Trojan War with all his men. A lot of times in mythology and in other symbolisms as well, the captain and the crew is an extension of the captain, and it is practically himself, whilst the ship is life and how we steer the body and our life in the waters of our experiences. So his crew are his own parts. The Cyclops is eating him apart, let's just say. The second part of that is actually showing us at the same time that he has cunning, he has wit, so he's made the choice to go home. Now he's overcome the first, he's tried very hard to actually bring those, to tie those elements with the second trial and force them to follow him into that direction. And if you recall on that trial, I also say that if you do it by force, sometimes he fights back. And that's the Cyclops again, how these things are eating him apart. And he has to use wit and cunning. Also, on the second trial, they say that usually you need to calmly ask for those parts of you to follow you along. And that's what he's doing here with the wit and cunning. So there's multiple symbolisms here. Again, like I said, I think on video 10 and 12, or maybe 11 and 12, I'm not sure. There's a lot more symbolisms underlining in every single part that we can pick apart, and on specific characters, on specific moments. There's a lot more, but we're doing the outline here, okay? And now, putting this all together, I guess I can add a couple extra little bits, tidbits here and there, to actually make it make even more sense. So, at this point, he has made a choice. he has tried to bring himself forward by force. This is starting to eat him apart, so now he tries with cunning and will, and to try to reason with himself to keep going forward. And as soon as he manages that, then comes ego. And this is the part of the lesson of ego within that same one. He starts being all, it's Odysseus, it was me that did it. And anything we do with ego pretty much is going to backfire. And that's the lesson of what happens in the entire story afterwards, because Poseidon's like, oh, hi Odysseus. I'm gonna hunt you down. It's kind of like the whole story at that point. After that, we go to the Aeolos and the bag of wind. This is a lesson that shows us that once we master the energies of life, our own forces, and pretty much creation, let's just say, that the journey home is very easy. This is a very nice trial, by the way, like once you look at it, all the synopsis, because it shows us how easy it is in the end in all of this, even like when it comes to spiritualism and all that stuff, how easy it is in the end to just be good, to just, like how close home is. It's right there. It shows us that as well in this trial. It's like, hey, the light is right there. It's always there. Just have discipline, follow the rules, master the winds. You have favorable winds, my friend, and you'll go home. It's that simple. It shows at this point that he had not mastered discipline, and obviously it throws him back down, all the way back to the island where he was. So at this moment also, we can also argue that he had a bit of a connection with that return. And I would argue to a certain extent that's kind of like heightening his senses even more to, I want to go home, okay? And if we translate this into our experiences when it comes to the light, it's some metaphysical experience that we have and we're like, oh shit, that was beautiful. I want to find a way to get back to that. So the lesson here is that if you don't have discipline and if you don't know how to master all these things, then you're going to pretty much fall apart. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the previous lesson as well. At the end of the previous lesson where he's still working with ego, there's parts inside him that don't have discipline, there's parts inside him that don't trust him. All those things need to be settled and need to be cleansed in order for you to be able to go home. Because if they're not cleansed, they're going to throw you all the way back down. That's what it's showing us. So he could not go home with his entire crew because his entire crew symbolizes all his baser kind of forms. Then we go to the next trial, which is the Les Trigones. And this is a lesson in vigilance. It's showing us that just when you think that, I'm doing pretty good, I'm going on my way, and stuff, that's when temptations, or when we're chill and we're not, aware of it, that's when they start to kind of like eat onto us again, latch onto us and be like, hey, maybe we can drink some wine. Hey, maybe we can have our way with some women. Hey, you know what? Let's go here, let's go there. Next thing you know, he's all the way back to, sacking a second city of the Kykonos. You know what I mean? He's back to doing war. So always be vigilant. That's what it shows. That do not at any point of time falter. Don't think that because you're moving forward and you're doing good steps, that there's still no temptations and you still can't fall. That's the Les Trigones. And at that point, he actually starts to become a little bit more vigilant. Things are slowly starting to become more and more confined and refined around Odysseus at this point. Okay, he's starting to fight with himself. He's starting to, through will and cunning, to form himself. He starts realizes with regards to discipline, if you notice, he had discipline, but it was his baser forms or his baser temptations that threw him back down. So at this point, he's pretty pissed, with himself, as we all are with ourselves. And then he continues down the journey. He has to be vigilant, he has to be wary for all the moments and all the things that can happen and that can go wrong, which is also, it kind of reflects in the previous one as well, where he wasn't wary enough and those parts of him threw him all the way back to the island of Aeolos. Now, the next trial after that is, for me, the turning point. This is the point in the physical realm where we start to actually get control of all the tools that are available to us and properly start to analyze it with wisdom and through experience to forge a path forward. Okay? And that's Circe, Kirke. That's the trial of Kirke, which is a trial of balance. We have to realize that indulging in things within our life is not a bad thing, because we learn from them, and that's part of our life, and that is the journey forward. Losing ourselves into those, however, is what makes us, as that story shows, turns us into swine, into pigs, like addictions and so many other things. You can enjoy things, but losing yourself in them, you lose your own self. So this next part here is where he's starting to properly master his conscious self. This is the point where he's starting to master his own abilities. This is the point where he's starting to have his physical form more and more control over, and he starts to turn the swine back into his man. He's starting to take control of his senses, and he's starting to actually plan a path forward. His consciousness is being elevated at this point, and ultimately he gets a whole bunch of information out of this whole process and wisdom, which helps him going forward. From here on, I would say, is where the first true turning point starts, because you need to be first in your conscious state, have revealed your path forward and how you're actually going to go about it, and have those wisdoms set out to you. And that shows the balance as well. He doesn't run away from it, he doesn't fight it. He unites with Cersei, and for a year he is fed with that wisdom. Basically, he's working with himself on a conscious level. He has information with regards to what he's supposed to do going forward. Cersei gives him certain information with regards to again, the sirens, Scylla and Harivdis, how to go about that. Also the Island of the Sun, the cattle. She gives a lot of information about those things, and most importantly, sets him on the path to go to the underworld, which is usually how it happens in real life as well. In order for us to deep dive and go into our subconscious, into a deeper spiritual dive, we need to have sorted it out and figured it out on the conscious level that we want to do this journey. So that's the turning point, in my opinion. A lot of people say that it's the next trial, the trial number 7, which is the turning point. For me, Cersei is the gold point. It's the turning point where in his conscious self, that's when he makes the choices. That's when he starts to realize things. That's when he starts to put things together. And that's when he sets forward for a deeper esoterical dive. Which brings us to trial number 7, which is the underworld. The journey to the underworld reveals a lot of things to him. This can be, again, symbolizing the underworld, spirit form, that or not of the living, therefore of the soul, therefore ethereal, something that is not part of the living world. We could say to a very large degree, it could be through meditation, it could be through any other experiences. In ancient Greece, they used to use substances for a lot of the oracles in the Delphi and other places as well, that they would see certain things, and so on and so forth. It's a deep dive at this point, and he sees and experiences certain situations, which again unveil to him even more things for his future, but with much more detail now, even to the point where the blind prophet starts to explain to him of what he's supposed to do and what he's going to go through, and once he reaches home, as if it's like it's going to happen, and once you reach home, you're going to do this and this and this, and you're going to go into the mainland, bury your ore as a sacrifice to Poseidon, and leave your old life behind you, as a proper full cleansing at that point. At this point here, he also has other information, which again kind of coincides with deeper esoterical knowledge that can be achieved through these deep dives, that can have spiritual deep dives, such as what's going on at his home. Now, knowing the symbolism that the suitors are himself, this is the point where he starts to realize, I have shadows and I have demons inside me, and I need to cleanse those parts inside me. I need to at some point take control of the darkness inside me with light and cleanse it. Okay? So he is starting to map out a much deeper chart with regards to where his sensation is going to go and how he's going to go about it. Right after that, we go back into the adventure, the sirens. Now, the sirens shows us that he has what we call in ancient Greece, know thyself. Basically, in Delphi as well, they had it over the Temple of Apollo. I think it was the Temple of Apollo. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Which means know thyself. You need to know yourself, which he has started to do that journey already on trial 6 and 7 with Cersei and the underworld. At this point, he knows his weaknesses. That's what the sirens are showing. He has to be aware. He has to be present with regards to life around him. Okay, so he has to be aware. But you need to tie yourself down and leave your senses guide you through certain situations. That's like when you're really at this point aware of what your weaknesses and what your strengths are. You have the foresight to plan ahead of how you're going to do certain things without faltering. So what he does, his men, which is again a part of him, he puts wax on their ears and all that stuff, and says, you just go forward no matter what I do, and tie me on the mast. That's the point where our mind is struggling, but all our senses, we have started to master and have control over them. And we also have the foresight to start to actually figure out strategies of how to control certain situations around us. And it guides us through those situations in life. So again, huge temptation, you could say. Like at this point, the temptations are rising more and more, because the sirens is something that he hasn't experienced before. It's not his habits anymore. At this point, we're having temptations otherworldly to a certain degree. Like these are things he hasn't experienced before that are much more beautiful than he has ever experienced, a song that he has never heard of before. The temptations start to rise. But know thyself, he knows how to handle it, and he knows how to guide through that storm perfectly. Which then brings us to the next trial, Scylla and Charybdis. Now, at this one here, it's a pretty simple trial, realizing that we have to make sacrifice in our life, even on a personal level. There are certain parts sometimes within us that are in conflict with each other, and we can't have them all, and we have to pick. It's like, do you want to do this or do you want to do that? Do you want to go in that direction? Do you want to go in that direction? And it's like, okay, my path is clear. I want to go over there. Okay, you're going to have to lose certain traits. You're going to have to trade them in. You're going to have to sacrifice them. You're going to have to learn the hard way that there are certain things that you want to indulge yourself into that are not going to help you down that journey. Either you're going to leave some of those inside, or you're not going to live them and you're going to lose your entire crew and you're going to crash right here and your journey ends here. Also, it is symbolically at the same time for jobs, for war, for a whole bunch of stuff, wherever there's leaders. Just like a leader, you need to know that when you're presented with two difficult situations and two bad choices, you have to have the courage to guide yourself through the lesser evil and be like, you know what? There's no way out of this. I have to save as many people as I can, or I have to do the best choice out of the two bad choices. And that can be on a personal level, it can be in a business level, it can be in a whole bunch of different ways. After he does that, it shows that he really does start to have even more obvious determination to go home. That's what it's showing us, that he's quite determined. He's gone through a lot of things at this point, and you notice how after Circe and the journey to the underworld, he's much more decided on every one of his choices and much more precise with how he goes about it. It's his men ultimately that are bringing him back, but his man is himself. And that's what he's doing throughout this entire journey. He's slowly cleansing himself. In each case, the lesser parts in every situation are falling apart, are falling away. And then the lesser parts, and then the lesser parts, until he cleanses all of that away from him. Which brings us, after Scylla and Charybdis, where he chooses the lesser of two evils, Scylla, which is going to take some of his men. They reach the island of the sun. Here, he has been warned by both the blind prophet and Circe beforehand. First Circe, so on a conscious level he's starting to realize, I shouldn't mess around with the cosmic laws and I shouldn't cross ethical boundaries. And then he finds that out and double checks it, you might say, on a spiritual level. And the story here is that he should not touch the cattle or the sheep of Helios, of the sun, and it's the island of the sun, and it is something holy and divine. It symbolizes something holy and divine. I would argue ethics and pretty much also the laws of the cosmos. We do not cross certain boundaries and adhere to our baser instincts of survival, because that's the difference between us and animals. It also shows that there's a lot more reserve in the human soul, and it can manifest a lot more power to pull forward than we think is available. This comes in a form of an involuntary fasting, so they haven't volunteered for that fasting, which has been also symbolically seen in other religions. Christ was fasting for 40 days. And to take full control of ourselves, we have to fight against touching the food, let's just say. Certain boundaries we don't cross. We don't become animals. And the ends do not justify the means. His men, obviously, do not adhere to this. And it's the final purification where they obviously slaughter the cattle and they eat it. And they set out. Zeus brings a storm on them, strikes them down with a lightning bolt, and all his remaining men, however many they are completely drowned. Odysseus is the only one that has been saved and has been left alive, and he's the only one that kept to the order of not touching the cattle. Simultaneously, at this point, it also shows us that those baser fears and succumbing to those baser fears is what's creating the survival instincts most of the time, and the survival instincts are working much more on fear rather than intuition or wisdom or any kind of other elevated thinking. And it's proof because Odysseus, they were thinking, oh, we're going to die anyway, and that wasn't true because Odysseus did survive. So they could have kept surviving without having eaten the cattle, and there are still more reserves in us. But once we go into fear-mongering and once we start listening to our baser instincts and our baser survival, basically become animals, then we start to throw out the window cosmic laws and whatever kind of other ethics there are out there. those parts of him were cleansed in that last moment. And also the fasting is a cleansing period, and also at the same time it is a way of taking control of oneself. How did he in this story take control of himself? By getting rid of all those parts. Basically now it's just himself. And if you notice, for several trials, that pure part himself has always been on track. It's always been, going into the right direction. It's those lesser parts of him that he's been constantly, slowly getting rid of, cleansing, and in a sense controlling, until he reaches the point where he's just him left alone. At this point you can say he has total and full control over himself on the physical plane. It's important to mention that. Now after that, he obviously shipwrecks on the island of Calypso, and this is a pretty important trial here, because it's the trial between immortality and eternity. He is given everything at this point. Small temptations will not suffice. He doesn't have his baser, emotions around him anymore, or instincts or anything like that. He has cleansed all that. So just giving him a great feast or giving him, whatever else will not suffice. The temptation has to be pretty big. So what is the temptation here with Calypso, who falls in love with him? Basically everything. He has immortality, youth, no hunger, like he has everything. A lot of people would lose it at that point there and be like, you know what, I'm good here. It's the trial between immortality, something temporary, ultimately temporary, because you're still, even if it's immortal, it's for 100, 1,000, 2,000 years, at some point you still realize, I'm still not home. I still haven't gone home. Okay, so no matter how much you linger there, your journey still hasn't finished. So it's always temporary, because you always still have somewhere to go. Your retreat or your return back to the light. And it's not true satisfaction in the end. And he feels that, and that's why he feels saddened, and that's why he's in conflict with this whole situation, and he wants to leave, because he's not home. He's not reunited with his soul, his family. He's not in the light. And this is the final trial with regards to his resolve, whether he will choose eternity or immortality. And he chooses eternity. The gods send word to Calypso through Hermes, telling her, hey, let him go. 7 years later, this happens. She helps him build a raft, and he leaves. Which brings us now to the final trial, which is the Phaakes, and basically this is a trial of grace. He has surpassed all his trials, and once you actually prove that you're ready, life or pretty much everything around you is just going to conspire to bring you home. It's just going to work towards you. That's the last final trial of grace. Now, after that, obviously, they take him home. They help him on his way to Ithaca. He goes to Ithaca, and that's where we have the trial of the Axis, which is on a more spiritual plane and a spiritual level now. It's not just his characteristics and just the things that he actually has to take control of and manifest with regards to his character. Now he goes into a very deep dive with regards to cutting off all those shadows that are the birthplace, you could argue to a certain degree, of all these things that were manifesting inside him. And ultimately, you could also trace that back to when he left the island to go to the war. He left from the island with his army. So all these shadows inside him is what beckoned him, or what pushed him to go to the war with that entire army around him. And basically that entire army, that entire part of him was created from that shadow, from those suras, from those demons, in a certain extent, in a certain way, residing inside us. Once he's reached that point where he has the perfect balance, it's shown with the trial of the axis, the left and the right, the 12 axes shooting right down the middle. Once he actually shows that he has total control over his mind and he shoots straight with his thoughts, now it shows that he's ready to, get to business and cut those last shadows out of himself. And upon doing that, that's when he reunites with his soul. But he's not finished yet. At this point is where he has to leave the shores, and he has to go inland and reach a place where he finds the people that have never heard of the sea, basically the ore as a symbol that they see it and they don't know about it. It's symbolizing sort of that now with your soul you're going to somewhere else where it's higher planes that don't know about this world and this material world. So you go somewhere else, and at that place there is where you do that final sacrifice of letting go of your past life. Because a lot of people could be like at that point, hey, that was a pretty good, cool adventure. I had a lot of fun now that I think about it. Let's go do it again. So that's the final act where he actually grows old, and that's the symbolism of going off into eternity. and it all ends with Odysseus happily ever after, let's just say. That is the entire story of the Odyssey, and that's the entire through line and the synopsis, seeing it all together, how it all comes together, and what it all symbolizes.